science scanned Honnold's brain, and one of the things that kind of came out of that film is like, oh, he doesn't experience fear like the rest of us. He refutes that. He says, no, I experience fear. I've just kind of trained over years to have more control and comfort around what my fear response is. You spent a lot of intimate time with him. I've never seen that guy gripped, I don't think.
Oh, I
It's
have.
okay. Yeah, like
I've seen him gripped.
under what circumstances? What shakes Alex Honnold?
Where it looked like he could die mostly.
Yeah, that would
Like
do it.
we did this trip to Antarctica together, and we raged while we were down there. We did I think I don't even know how many, like at least 10. I want to say at least 10 first ascents down there. We climbed so many different towers that it's all a blur. But I remember this one, like in particular, was pretty gnarly. He led this pitch that it's probably only like 11D or 12A or something, but overhanging, extremely loose, and it was basically a free solo, and yeah, I remember at one point him basically telling me shut up. I'm like, it was palpable, like the fear in his voice. It was getting really serious. And honestly, that whole trip, it was just like we were like every single, because you have to rappel everything, you have to set all your anchors. It was like every single like rappel. He was scared. I was scared. I mean, we were scared for good reason, right? Because you're like, you got to get down. You're like improvising anchors. Sometimes the anchors aren't exactly textbook. It's just like it's scary. It's scary stuff. It's like yeah, definitely.
I do recall him telling me a story about how he was like stress eating Nutella out of the thing in the tent, like absolutely like frazzled from something. So it must have been that there. We didn't get into what the climb was.
It probably was. I know it was like, yeah, it was definitely pretty intense, that rock climb. The funny thing too, he's also such a stubborn motherfucker. And I was like, dude, the line goes left, like look at the crack. And it's all, no, we gotta do like the direct out the head wall. Then he goes direct out the head wall and almost kills himself, and I'm all like, and it was like a chaussee, like there was like super nice rock off to the left. I'm like, all right, sweet, like take us up this chaussee bullshit, you stubborn motherfucker. But yeah, anyways,
You love Chauss.
good times. It wouldn't have been as memorable if we'd gone up the sweet splitter 510 to the left. I mean, obviously, Honnold to me is like the gold standard of like what I grew up as badass in the climbing, because so I grew up like looking up to Peter Croft as kind of like the coolest climber. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of respect for free soloing, and I think it's really kind of the ultimate, the ultimate dedication and commitment in climbing. And so, I find that type of climbing really impressive. And so, I am very curious to see, like when is that next climber going to come along? And interestingly, it just seems like that whole aspect of climbing has kind of become much less popular since I started. And even in some ways was kind of got less popular after Free Solo came out. It was almost like, it got marginalized somehow by that film in a weird way that I don't fully understand, where, you don't really see much, action in that space, or people trying to prove themselves in that space of climbing.
All right, y'all, just a quick break here to ask you a question. Do you do a lot of lead climbing like I do? If the answer is yes, you need to check out the Neox, which is this new belay device by Petzl. I just tried this thing out at the gym. I love how it works. It was designed with lead climbers in mind, and I got to say, it works great. You can think of it basically as a gree-gree. So it looks and operates the same, but there is some magic engineering inside of this with this little wheel that spins, and it allows you to pay out slack quickly and smoothly when belaying somebody on lead. Like there's like zero friction, which makes it very low impact on the belayer. It does not hurt your shoulders to be belaying for a while, and very easy on the climber to clip draws and not worry about getting short roped. And because it's Petzl, it's the best of the best. You can find your Neox at your local gear shop, and just swing on over to petzl.com to learn more and access the inaccessible. Yeah, I wonder why that is. I would love to just explore that for a second, because it is interesting to hear how commonplace soloing was when you were in the Rock Monkey days early on in the valley there. And Is it because Alex just did like the ultimate objective that maybe will never be topped? And it's like the most impressive thing that's ever happened in sport. Was that like people were like, well, screw it, it's done, and they just hung up the spurs? Or is there a bigger shift in climbing away from boulder styles of climbing, do you think?
Well, to push back against Honnold having done the raddest thing, you could argue that he was able to rise to like the standards that have been set by Alain Robert, like, free soloing, like, even at maybe a harder level than Honnold ever has, back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, now, of course, like, to be, fully fair, like, definitely, like, free soloing the free rider is mind numbing, and just the level of just precision expertise it takes to do that is like, it's very impressive. Maybe that's part of it, right? It is like the gauntlet, has been thrown down, right? Like, to one up that is like extremely difficult to do. I find it really interesting that still we're waiting for like another person to free solo Astroman. As far as I know, it's still just Croft, Potter, and Honnold that have done it, which is kind of crazy to me because that's like 11C,
right?
And now it's Valley, like gnarly 11C, slippery. It's got a Bombay chimney. It's like certainly much more impressive than climbing 9A these days. In a sense, right? It would be climbing that without a rope. It's interesting. It's interesting that
did Brad not do Brad Gobright? Did he not do that one?
No, in fact, I remember having a conversation with Brad and Brad was like, "Oh, I would never solo Astroman.
No shit.
So wow. I don't like it. He's all too scary." which is funny because Brad, like maybe some people don't know that I made this film about Brad Gobright called Safety Third.
Safety Third,
where we filmed Brad doing like the hardest free solo in Colorado. It's like a 12C, slippery, powerful, reachy, gnarly, definitely much harder than Astroman free solo. Although, you could argue Astroman does have like a lot of 511 in a row. It's sustained. It's very exposed. I mean, it's certainly something I aspired to and never just had the balls / the forearms for it. I was never quite elite enough of a climber to do it, but I'd certainly had dreams of doing it. And I wonder, if there's people who were like me, who had that dream at least, and maybe are thinking about that, and will there be another great, free soloist in my lifetime? I'm curious to see, if there is, it remains to be seen.
So, in your estimation, in your experience, what does it take to be a good free soloist?
A good free soloist? I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's to be a good free soloist, whatever that means, but it means that you don't fall ever.
Right.